The Easter holidays, we know, just a couple days away, and the head of the Catholic Church had a few things to say this week, and certainly some of the folks here wanted to listen real carefully, if at all possible, if there'd be a change here in terms of who can be a priest and can priests, in fact, get married. Well, during an address on the Holy Thursday, Pope Benedict XVI said women will never be priests in the church, and he also said the church would not tolerate disobedience when it came to the fundamental teachings, including things like celibacy for priests and the ordination of women. Take a listen.
Recently, a group of priests from a European country issued a summons to disobedience, and at the same time gave concrete examples of the forms this disobedience might take, even to the point of disregarding definitive decisions of the Church's magisterium, such as the question of women's ordination, for which Blessed Pope John Paul II stated irrevocably that the Church has received no authority from the Lord.
So, will there ever be a female priest in the Catholic Church, or will we ever see the day again, and I'll explain that in a second, where priests are allowed to marry? Well, join us to discuss that. Elena Procario-Foley, she chairs the Department of Religious Studies at Iona College. Professor, thank you so much for a few minutes.
Thank you.
Well, let me just show everybody where the laity stands on this. It was a poll which was asked about whether or not the Pope should allow women to be priests. And the numbers, well, 55% of the folks said yes, and you can see 44% saying no. And then when asked if priests ought to be allowed to marry, almost 2 to 1, the public said yes. Let me ask you, do you think in our lifetimes we'll see either scenario, women in the priesthood or priests marrying?
In our lifetimes, a hard prognostication, but conventional wisdom has it that married priests would be first, and there are a few reasons for that. Priests and bishops were allowed to be married up until 1179, where the Third Lateran Council, decreed that there would be priestly celibacy, and that was because there were problems with dynasties, political dynasties, priestly families, and land inheritance rights.
Yep.
So to clean up what had become a corrupt priesthood and undue influence of politics on religion, in that case, to use contemporary terms, there was a change. People wanted the change at the time because they wanted a holier priesthood. This was going to make it that at that time. So we have had a married priesthood.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize that, Professor. It was really economics here, because all of a sudden you had to basically support an entire family here instead of a single priest, and also you had basically handing down the parish from one father to son and keep on going down the line. The idea of women as priests, I mean, people point to, for example, obviously you have female rabbis. You have, I mean, they can obviously be heads of churches and other faiths. You don't think that's as likely, though, at least for the Catholic Church?
In our lifetime, probably not, because on the married priest, just to return to that for a moment, we have, the Roman Catholic Church has converted Episcopalian and Anglican priests who are married.
Also Greek Orthodox, right? With Greek Orthodox, I know that there have been certain priests that have come from that faith, they convert to Catholicism, right, and all of a sudden they already have families and they're allowed to keep them, right?
Exactly, exactly. And there was recently a kind of new category set up for Anglican priests who wanted to come into the Roman Church and actually maintain their liturgical right as well. So there's possibility for change and accommodation.
Women as priests, though?
Women as priests, there's been a series of documents in the past 25, 30 years. And so in 1976, there was a very important document from the Pope, Paul VI at the time, saying essentially that there could be no ability of the Church to ordain women. And the reason for this is that they say that priests represent Christ. In persona Christi is the phrase. So they act in the person of Christ. The priest is a sacramental sign of Christ, and as a sign of Christ, the priest must be male. It's that third piece that fails the test for many people today.
Yeah. About the necessity, though, I mean, I remember when the Pope visited our neck of the woods not that long ago. The graduating class of seminarians was less than one hand. The amount of seminaries that have shuttered in this country because there's not enough, where you have a graduating class of one.
Right.
I mean, you go through the New York Archdiocese right now, and you can count on one hand those studying to be priests. And for those of us like myself and the laity, you wonder about the future of this. I mean, right now, priests, you know this, they got to run around from parish to parish to cover the shortfall. And so many of the priests have to be imported from other countries. And it's not just an American problem now. Where does the future priest come from if we're going to keep it with the current celibate male priest as a pool when so few people are joining the vocation?
Some people call this the reverse mission, because growth in the numbers of Catholics and Catholic priests are in the two-thirds world, in India, in Africa, and as you said, these ordained men then are being shipped out to America or perhaps some places in Europe. So it's difficult. We do not want to prevent the faithful from the sacraments. You want the people to have access to the sacraments. And so there are people and theologians who discuss whether there could be this change. The clear teaching of the past three popes is that no, there cannot be a change.
But certainly this pope makes it clear, not on his watch.
He sure does, Richard. Yeah. But for people like me, and we sort of had this debate as it relates to the masters. I mean, much less, you know, but the same argument about women not being part.
I was thinking about that.
But what I'm trying to understand, I'm listening to the conversation, and I'm just baffled. I understand your reasons of the reason why the church won't do this, but this is the year 2012. And does that argument really still hold water in 2012?
Well, for a lot of people, it does not. It's a very, very painful issue for Catholic women who remain in the church, a very painful issue. Hard to understand the teaching.